Okay, we are going to talk about ergogenic aids, and this is covered in chapter 13 of the Law of Running. Let's go through this a little bit because a lot of times when we say ergogenic aids, the immediate thought is illegal substances. And in the sports world, unfortunately, there are a lot of examples of using illegal substances to enhance performance. Now, let's look up what ergogenic actually means and then separate out ergogenic from a legal perspective and from an illegal perspective. So ergogenic, if you look up in Tabor's medical dictionary, simply says having the ability to increase work. Ergogenic aids, adding on that second part, is in sports medicine, the questionable and often harmful use of various substances in an attempt to enhance performance. Okay, so there is the innuendo, the sense that ergogenic aids are unethical and illegal. Now, I want to distinguish ergogenic aid even from performance enhancing drugs. This is typically used to describe a category of drugs that are banned for use in sports. All right, and this is a big problem in sports. Now, there are lists of banned substances. There are institutions that test for banned substances, USADA, for example. And this is a big problem in sports, in that there are people willing to take banned substances in order to enhance performance or enhance the training response or what have you. Now, many of these have a justifiable medical use, but once you start using them for enhancing performance solely, then that's where it ends up being a bit of a problem in the sports world. A bit of a problem, a big problem. And the problem exists not only at the professional athlete end, like the pictures I showed, but also at the age group competitor end. And there are times that people are doping, they are taking something illegal, and they may not even realize it. So, for example, as athletes get older, they may go see their doctor and want to adjust their testosterone level, because as you get older, your testosterone level drops, and they go in testosterone therapy. That's illegal. That's against the rules. And this is a message that needs to continue to be pushed out to athletes of all different levels. Is there are times that you are taking something that you should not be taking, and it's giving you an unfair advantage. What's the problem with taking a lot of these meds? Well, a lot of these substances, a lot of times they do have harmful effects, or they have side effects that are not desirable and may have a long-term impact on health. The other problem is not everyone has access to the same treatments, and that creates an unfair advantage for certain people. So it is a hot topic, continuing to be a hot topic, and especially in endurance sports, and one that we do try to uh, educate athletes to avoid taking substances unknowingly, and obviously don't take substances knowingly. Now, in chapter 13, as you look through that material, you'll see Noakes does not limit his focus or discussion on the illegal use of drugs to enhance performance. He does talk about some, but it's not limited to just going through illegal ergogenic aids. And he covers a wide variety of topics, from exercise itself to vitamins. And I'll go through some of the topics that he goes through in the chapter. Okay, so knowing that we are not going to just focus on illegal use of substances, uh, but there are some examples of ergogenic aids that is legal, and I'm going to identify them as we go through this. How much benefit can you expect? Well, it does depend on the initial level of fitness and performance the athlete has. Now, a small level of increase in performance, for even a 1 to 1.5% difference, could result in a change in performance that could lead to a gold medal. So for example, 100-meter sprint, if you go from 9.7 seconds to 9.6 seconds, you're probably going to win your event. Marathon, going from a 2-hour 10-minute to a 2-hour 8-minute, that can be the difference in getting a top spot or even getting on the podium in some races. So small changes can have a big impact on performance and performance outcome. So we got to keep that in mind. So now, what's an ergogenic aid? Well, you could even classify exercise training as ergogenic because it is all designed to increase the ability to do more work. It works. You train, you get better, and like these little demotivator posters. If a pretty poster and a cute saying are all it takes to motivate you, you probably have a very easy job, the kind robots will be doing soon. Yeah, motivation for athletes, you've got to have a sense of what you're working for. You've got to have a plan. And a lot of what we talked about through this semester is developing a exercise plan that will help someone reach their performance goals. And the message board below is just, an example of, having the right motivation to exercise. You can't take shortcuts. There's no pill. Well, that's the problem, is that there are some pills that will help you. But at the end of the day, there's more value in using exercise training to achieve your goals versus some medicinal way to do it. All right, anabolic steroids and other banned hormones. Anabolic is pertaining to the process of building up. A steroid is an organic compound containing in its chemical nucleus that ring. All right, it's a special compound. Anabolic steroid is any group of synthetic hormones, usually, that are derivatives of testosterone, and they can be used medically to promote tissue growth. And so there is a real use for this, medical use for this. But it can be abused by athletes, and this is a problem, obviously, in a sport. Testosterone is a steroid sex hormone that's responsible for the growth and development of masculine characteristics. And this is an area that, especially as athletes get older, they will start taking testosterone because as they get older, their testosterone levels drop. And it is illegal for athletes to take testosterone, even even an older individual. So older individuals need to consider what they're trying to do in the sport. If they're going to take testosterone because their testosterone levels are low, it may be that they need to step away from the sport at that point and not compete, because it is an unfair advantage for a 50 some odd year old or 60-year-old to take testosterone where the others are not. All right, anabolic steroids and other banned hormones, they are banned. The magnitude of these can be quite large. It can yield an increase in power, speed, endurance, rate of recovery, and table 13.1 has a list of all the expected benefits. Now, it was first used by power athletes, and low doses may actually benefit endurance athletes. And as I've been mentioning, there's lots of suspicion of age group athletes using testosterone, and it is easy to get access to, unfortunately. And this is a problem, and it's a problem of trying to figure out how to test athletes, and then determine if they are abusing and using banned substances like testosterone. Okay, the whole idea of a lot of these ergogenic aids is you're increasing oxygen delivery to the muscles, and this is the cardiovascular anaerobic model that predicts superior performance is achieved by enhancing oxygen delivery to the muscle. That will lead to an increase in cardiac output, this could lead to an increase in cardiac output, heart rate times stroke volume, could lead to an increase in oxygen carrying capacity of blood, so how much blood is in the arteries, and it could increase the capacity of muscle to extract and use oxygen. which would show up in the amount of oxygen in the venous return blood. And so you'll notice this is, in essence, the Fick equation: cardiac output times AVO2 difference. And the whole idea of uh, uh, ergogenic aids what we're talking about now is to increase this oxygen delivery to the muscles um, in order that chemical energy can be transformed to mechanical energy. Yeah, you can also lead to an increase in capillaries, mitochondrial volume, enzyme contact. These are all potential sources of how uh, substance ergogenic aids are going to work. Now, if you want to increase oxygen delivery legally, you could you could tap into an altitude acclimatization routine. And the idea of an altitude training regime is that you really want to live at a high altitude and train at a low altitude. The benefits of living at a high altitude are attributed to lower available oxygen, so you have an increase in red blood cell count. The problem with being at a high altitude is you have less oxygen available, and so you train slower, and that's a bad thing. And so what you really want to do is to adapt at a high altitude, let your body adapt and have an increase in red blood cell count, but then go down into a lower level or lower altitude and actually train normally or faster uh, and get the training response. So this is a real tool used by athletes where they do try to take advantage of an altitude adaptation as an ergogenic aid, legal too. Increasing oxygen delivery, blood doping, this is illegal. A technique used to increase red blood cell count. What happened, the way this works is an athlete will have his or her blood taken out, stored, maybe oxygenated even, and then reinfused back into the person prior to competition. So they increase the amount of red blood cell count. Now, that's if you're taking blood from yourself. You can also take blood from another compatible donor. The risks are somewhat obvious. Infection. You can have some transmission of disease, especially if you're taking blood from somebody else. You have potential toxicity of improperly stored blood. You have the thickening of blood, clot formation. This could increase the chance of heart attack, stroke, or pulmonary edema. There's been several examples of people dying from improper blood doping illegally and having a heart attack. So this is a real risk. The problem is that it works. Some research has actually been done on this, where they did a VO2 max test 5 weeks apart. They did 2 groups, blood doping and control, double blind. So nobody knew what was being infused to each subject. They saw a 6% increase in VO2 max and a 39% increase in endurance running time. And that was maintained for 7 days. So this is a problem. If blood doping didn't work, then nobody would be doing it. But blood doping does work, but it is illegal and it is dangerous. Another way to increase oxygen delivery is to use a hormone like erythropoietin, EPO. It's produced naturally by the kidney. It stimulates red blood cell production, which carries the oxygen in the blood. And again, a viable medical use for this synthetic EPO is used to treat anemia, and that's a good thing. Sometimes people do refer to EPO as blood doping, but blood doping is a procedure where you take the blood out and reinfuse the blood, or you're infusing additional blood. EPO is taking a hormone. Again, the problem, it works, similar to blood doping improvements. So by taking a hormone, you can increase the red blood cell content of the blood, increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, which means greater ability to deliver oxygenated blood to the working muscle. And that oxygen is then used to transform chemical energy to mechanical energy. All right. So again, it does work, and it is banned. Increase in oxygen delivery. You can use a high altitude or a nitrogen house, or so you're living at a low altitude and you are breathing air with low levels of oxygen during sleep or rest or long periods of time. So you put a tent around your bed, and these do exist. The simulated altitude has to be greater than 2,500 meters to be able to get some benefit. And there is some evidence that this does work. And this is legal. Training with oxygen enriched air, inhalation of air with increased oxygen percentage improves exercise capacity. Noakes hypothesizes that the increased oxygen to the heart is what leads to the increased performance. So that goes back to that central governor model, that the brain is detecting oxygenated blood levels going to the heart. And if you can increase that oxygenated blood going to the heart, then you can increase performance. Just a hypothesis. Ergogenic aids covered in other chapters that we've gone through in other presentations. In taking carbohydrate is in essence an ergogenic aid to prevent hypoglycemia, especially. Pre-exercise carbohydrate loading, that in essence is an ergogenic aid. Ingesting fluid during exercise and even taking caffeine can be considered ergogenic aids. Now, the trick is when we start using the phrase ergogenic aids, there is a negative connotation to it. But we do need to be able to separate out ergogenic aids that are legal versus illegal. So taking caffeine is not illegal. Well, certain levels of caffeine are illegal. And it's important to know that some people respond to caffeine and some do not respond to caffeine. And so this is something we talked about in a previous presentation, but something that athletes do need to consider. All right, this is an odd one: sodium bicarbonate or sodium citrate. It may seem odd, but this is baking soda. So using baking soda has been explored as an ergogenic aid. Baking soda, in essence, buffers acids, and in the body, it would buffer lactic acid. So if you are in line with thinking that lactic acid is causing fatigue, then buffering that lactic acid could lead to a performance. The trick is right now we're not all necessarily convinced that lactic acid buildup is what's causing fatigue. So that this may or may not work. And as noted here, so there's responders and non-responders to this type of ergogenic aid. And you can have GI problems if you take in a big swig of baking soda. That can lead to some problems in the gut. Pre-cooling prior to exercise is a way to try to enhance the amount of work that you can do during exercise. And there is some evidence for this, especially if the event is going to be in a hot climate, and especially if the event is going to be a shorter distance, so something less than 30 minutes. Now, what I did not note here, but another one that goes along with this is to ingest crushed ice in the form of a Slurpee or something like that, where you're actually taking in ice to keep the core temperature cool. And that all falls in line with the central governor model, that there's a thermostat that's being monitored. And when the core temperature starts to go up, that the brain starts to shut things down. If you can keep the core temperature down, that could be a good thing. By ingesting ice, crushed ice, you actually have an opportunity to try to get that cooler fluid, a cooler substance closer to the core. Now, ingesting ice is actually better than ingesting cold water, because when you change ice from the solid state to the liquid state, you actually allow for greater cooling effect. So that's why slushies or slurpers, whatever they're called, where they're just crushed ice. If you can use that, that could be a good ergogenic aid in a race that's in a hot environment. All right, creatine supplementation. This is uh, probably more used in the strength world, but it is a ergogenic aid that is available. Uh, and creatine can be used. Creatine phosphate can be used in the ATP-CP pathway to produce ATP. Creatine is produced naturally in the liver. To increase phosphocreatine, you need to ingest high doses of creatine for at least 5 days, and the average daily intake about 1 gram per day. So my math doesn't hold up there, um, yeah, you got to take in probably quite a bit of creatine. The summary of the research, and I'll tell you that this research continues to take place, and we continue to understand our use of creatine. So some of the material in Noakes is a little bit dated, but uh, it- these are probably still holding up in general. Uh, in terms of endurance performance, it does improve, especially during intervals, enhances adaptation to weight training program. That's probably a really big area when we talk about creatine supplementation. Endurance performance may not be influenced uh, dramatically. The response to creatine supplementation is highly individual. Probably the key, and this was an issue early on with creatine, was there any health risk? And to date, there is not the evidence of a short or long-term health risk. Uh, Other aids, environmental aids. Well, it just seems odd to include this as an ergogenic aid, but if you're trying to improve the amount of work you can do, you want to look at the running surface. And if you're looking to do a PR for a race, you want to pick a course that the running surface is going to allow for that. So that's where this comes back into thinking about ergogenic. What's going to help improve work? Well, if I do a 5K on the beach, that's going to be tremendously hard and slow because of the surface. Uh, but if I do trail running, that may be a little bit better, or maybe I'll do it faster there, uh, or road, or even a track. And there's been a lot of interesting work on track construction and what surfaces the track should have in order to improve performance. And even something as simple as which lane to choose if you are running on a track, which lane to choose in order to allow for your fastest run to happen. Sometimes the inside lane is too tight of a turn, and sometimes the outside lane is too gradual a turn. So you've got to figure out which lane ultimately will help. Clothing choices can be a factor, especially when we start talking about environmental wind resistance or temperature. The clothing that you wear will fall into that category. Even things like compression socks will be considered ergogenic aids or potential ergogenic aids. So there's a lot that goes into thoughts on clothing. Pacing. It's odd to list this as an ergogenic aid because this is something that is more under control of the person. But you do want to figure out the best pacing strategy, optimal pacing strategy, not determined. I don't know why I've written that there. um, but you've got, everyone is a little bit different. So some people will be able to go out fast and then try to hold on. Some people will try to steady pace an event, and others may start off slower and then finish stronger. And so there is some value in figuring out your best pacing strategy for a particular distance. Okay, summary of ergogenic aids. Performance can be enhanced using several techniques and mechanisms. The banned substances we want to stay away from. And you want to encourage your athletes or people you talk to stay away from them. If it's on a banned list, you're not supposed to use them. The trick is knowing those lists and keeping up to date because they do change. And what was on some of the substances that were on the list 10 years ago are no longer on the substance because they're on the list because we know a little bit more about those substances. And other things have been added that were not on the list 10 years ago. There are legal mechanisms to improve work, and that's something that we often look at in terms of marginal gains that we can get from changing a running surface or shoes or the type of bike we use or wheels or tires, even things like air pressure. These are all factors designed or factors that uh, we can think about and change in order to improve the amount of work we can do during an event. Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. No, that attitude gets people into the mindset of cheating, and it's unfortunate that people do cheat. It does happen, and we certainly don't want to advocate that, and really want to educate athletes to stay away from cheating by taking banned substances. Okay, thanks